Good evening. My name is Matthew Fleissig. It's Thursday, May 1st, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Daniel Pitt Stoller. So, Daniel, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome, and I understand you brought some stuff with you?
I did. First, I wrote down some things that I wanted to remember to say. I'll try and just speak naturally as opposed to just reading, but I wanted to bring some notes. And what I brought here is my collection of all the playbills or programs from the shows that I did both here at Levels and at Great Neck South High School. I did a lot of theater here in Great Neck during my adolescent years, and I keep a collection of all the playbills. So I have those. I think it probably would not be too interesting if I actually spoke a lot about each show that I did, but I can at least leaf through them and see if anything is of note.
Sure, that'd be great.
Yeah. So I have a whole history of my life in Great Neck. So my parents grew up in Roslyn and went to Herrick's High School. They went to the same high school, though they didn't get together till later. I was born up in New Paltz, where my mom went to college. But in 1979, I was born in 77. In 79, my parents moved back to Long Island. They still had family here. And they had to choose where to live, and they chose Great Neck for a number of reasons. I mean, certainly the same reasons that everyone does: the school district, the park district, the libraries, all the things that recommend the community. And they found an apartment in the Great Neck Terrace apartments in that complex that was affordable. And so then both of my parents were able to be near their parents, who were still in Roslyn. And so I grew up, starting from the time I was almost 2 years old, I grew up in the Great Neck Terrace apartments. That's where they raised me. So there were 2 years of pre-K. For my first year of pre-K, they still had the pre-K program at E.M. Baker School. Then they changed it to Parkville, so I went to pre-K at Baker and then Parkville. And then I started kindergarten at Lakeville School in the fall of 1982. I know that Lakeville now, its whole kindergarten is at Parkville, and Lakeville is just 1 through 5. At that time, Lakeville had K through 6, but that changed while I was there. They changed to K through 5 while I was there. So I went to Lakeville for K through 5. I was in kindergarten when they changed principals there. The older principal was Ms. Harvey, and she retired, and Barbara Raber became the principal at Lakeville. She was principal there for a long time. The assistant principal when I went there was Dr. Courant, Leslie Courant, who later became the principal of Saddle Rock. And I'm dropping these names because a lot of people who grew up in Great Neck would remember some of these people. I could go through my list of teachers, and people would make those connections. But so in 1984, my brother Sam was born. By the way, I know you mentioned street names. When we lived in the Terrace, we lived on West Mill Drive, 11 West Mill Drive, which is right on the top of the hill if you're going around the circle. And the Great Neck Terrace was a cool neighborhood, by the way. They've got their own little neighborhood pool just for Great Neck Terrace residents. And there were always kids outside. You know how people talk about, kids nowadays on their screens and how the older generations were different. Having been born in 1977, I'm sort of the tail end of Generation X, almost a millennial, right? But I was a kid during that time when it was still that thing that you hear about where you get off the school bus after school, throw your bag down at home, and just go outside. And you wouldn't have to plan a play date. You would just see who else is running around the neighborhood. And the Great Neck Terrace was very much a neighborhood like that, where a lot of kids lived there. And, there are hills, and it's grassy, and they're garden apartments. There are grassy backyards and all kinds of hiding places and garden hoses. You spray your friend with the hose. It was a fun place to be a kid, the Great Neck Terrace. And I mentioned we had our own neighborhood pool, so we had a lot of fun there. So we were still in the Great Neck Terrace. My brother Sam was born in 1984. They changed the zones during my childhood so that even though we lived in the same place, I had gone to Lakeville, my brother went to Saddle Rock. I think Great Neck Terrace still goes to Saddle Rock now. but it was Lakeville when I was a kid. So I graduated Lakeville in 1988. My fifth grade teacher was Mr. Golden, Michael Golden, who later became a middle school math teacher and now still works for the district as a substitute. So I've seen him around. I still see him sometimes. I do some work for the school district. I teach an acting class on the weekends, and sometimes I teach in the summer school. So I still see Michael Golden around. I was just talking to some friends about this. Also, the retired music teacher, Dr. Shepard, James Shepard, there was a piece about him in the Record of the Great Neck News or somewhere recently. He still works as a sub in the district, and I get to see him around, so that's fun. So I went to Lakeville, and my brother went to Saddle Rock. I went on to South Middle. The transition to middle school was a little challenging for me because more than one elementary school feeds into the same middle school. And in elementary school, you feel like you know everybody. Now you're in a bigger school, and you don't feel like you know everybody. And I had always thought, I mean, you see that I have a bright, outgoing personality, so I thought of myself as a people person, but I was also a little bit different from other kids in various ways. I didn't necessarily mix well with kids. In fact, when I was a kid, there were times when I felt that I communicated better with adults, that adults understood me better. I didn't always mix well with other kids. So the beginning of middle school was a little challenging for me. Some bright spots were the chorus, middle school chorus. At that time, the chorus teacher was Ms. Blum, Shelley Blum. And I was just in her sixth grade music class, just music 6, and we were learning the hand signals for the scales, and we were singing scales. So she got to hear me sing. I wasn't auditioning, I was just singing because it was part of the course. And she grabbed me and she said, "You should think about joining chorus." And it meant a lot to me that she asked me. And I'm not boasting, it's not that I was such a good singer, but I think she needed boys that could sing at all. She got a lot more girls and not so many boys, so when she heard a boy that could sing at all, she was like, please, come and join us. But I took it very personally that I felt like I had an engraved invitation. So I joined chorus, and that felt good. Those were some of my first experiences performing in public before I was doing theater. Another bright spot was definitely the Latin program, which if we're talking about Great Neck, that's something that's now unusual. Very few school districts offer Latin, and the fact that Great Neck did and still does is such a special thing. And I'm someone who's interested in language. So when people inevitably ask the question, why do you want to learn a language that isn't spoken anymore? The fact that you're learning about the roots that so many words in English and Spanish and French and Portuguese and Italian come from, that meant a lot to me. So I had Dr. Pontone, who was, legendary in the district for years and years. And I would never say anything negative about him. He was great. He was wonderful. And you said we shouldn't say anything bad about people. No. But I think I can safely say he was sort of notorious because he was very wild. He sometimes said things that were surprising for a teacher to say. But he was a great encouragement to me. I learned a lot from him. I really appreciated Dr. Pontone. So those were bright spots, but middle school was challenging for me. And what made the biggest difference of all was the first time that I came down to levels here at the Great Neck Library. I saw flyers up for auditions for Little Shop of Horrors. It was 1990. Little Shop of Horrors, as a show, had been around for a few years, but there hadn't really been youth productions of it very often. Little Shop of Horrors is from the 80s. It was still rather new. And I was a big fan of the show. I listened to the record album. I saw the show when I was a kid. So I said, I've got to be part of this. I've got to try out. So that was my first Levels show. And so I came down to Levels, and I just stayed. My first show was Little Shop of Horrors. Then there were student-directed one-acts here at Levels. This was called Welcome to the Moon. It was 6 different plays, and I directed this one. 5 of my friends directed the other ones, and we were all friends. It was all just a group of friends that did show after show together. My friend Meredith directed A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. This is The Mousetrap, the Agatha Christie play. Hair, we did the musical Hair down here at Levels. This is one act that I directed, adaptation. It was on a double bill with The Zoo Story. And then this is a Theater South show. This is when I got to high school. All of these shows were when I was in 8th grade and when I first started 9th grade. So I did Levels all through 8th grade, and then I got to high school and I kept doing Levels, and I did Theater South. I also had other extracurricular activities. I was involved with the literary magazine Exit 33. I stayed in choir. I did a little bit with debate team. And again, because Great Neck is the focus, the fact that all these activities were available, I really thrived. I really tried to make the use of everything. It was like being at a buffet where you eat even more than you mean to, because there are just so many good things you can't choose. I just wanted to do everything. Sometimes I took on too much and I felt overwhelmed, but I loved being as busy as possible. I didn't want to stop. I wanted to do everything. So I was in high school when my sister Evelyn was born. I have a brother and sister. My brother was born in 84. My sister was born in 1993. So there's 15 years between us. I was in 10th grade when my little baby sister was born. And by then my family had moved from our apartment in the terrace to a house on Nassau Road. People sometimes get mixed up because in Great Neck we have a Nassau Drive and a Nassau Road. Nassau Drive is, where would you say that is? I guess in Kensington or somewhere. I mean, it's almost close to where you would take it all the way down the hill to get to like Community Drive in Manhasset. It's over there. It's farther east. Whereas Nassau Road is the first street you get to when you get to Nassau County. It's close to Queens. I mean, that's, I'm sure, why it has that name. If you're coming through Queens and going on Northern Boulevard, you know that you're in Nassau County when you get to Nassau Road. And there used to be a Sizzler up there at the top of the hill. I don't remember what restaurant or store is there now.
What type of food did they serve at Sizzler?
Oh, well, I didn't go there, but is that business not still known? Oh boy. I don't know. It was a popular brand. It was like a fast food restaurant. Anyway, so we had moved to the house on Nassau Road, which was a very short journey because the Great Neck Terrace is right next to Nassau Road. In fact, if you go all the way down Nassau Road from Northern Boulevard all the way down to like where the Little Neck train station is, if you make a right before the Little Neck train station, now you're on West Mill Drive going into the terrace apartments. So we moved just like from the top of the hill in an apartment to a house at the bottom of the hill. And some of our stuff that we moved, we actually just walked right down the hill. We just made 100 trips. I mean, some of the things we had to move by car. But, I remember making a lot of trips back and forth, sometimes on foot. And being on Nassau Road meant that we were zoned for Lakeville again. So my sister, I went to Lakeville, my brother went to Saddle Rock, my sister went to Lakeville. Also, I was in high school when I met the girl who's now my wife, Wendy Weisner. Her family had moved from California when she was in 7th grade. So Wendy didn't go to the Great Neck elementary schools, but she did all of high school in Great Neck. Her younger sister, Dahlia Weisner, did go to E.M. Baker. So when I was growing up, I sort of rolled my eyes at Great Neck. I thought of it as sort of a snobby town with materialistic people. I was growing up in an apartment complex, so I thought I was more Street, I thought I was more, I thought I was more authentic, and these people who lived in these palaces and these big houses, I couldn't, measure up. And I was a poet, I was artsy, I was a drama kid, I was sort of a hippie. So I kind of struggled to fit in a lot of ways and at a lot of times. Part of the reason I was so excited when I got involved with Levels was because I found the Great Neck counterculture. I found my niche. I felt like I found my people. They're hiding down here. They're in this basement over here. I had a similar feeling when I met Wendy, who had moved from California. She also was a poet and a hippie and didn't exactly fit in Great Neck. And so we were like a perfect match. And we met close to the beginning of high school, and we've been together almost the whole time since then.
Just in case you didn't say, who was running Levels when you started?
So when I first came to Levels in the summer of 1990, the director was Joe Latini, who was a grown-up Levels kid himself, who had moved through the ranks. He became a staff member, and then he became the director. He's a guitar guy. I don't know what town he lives in now, but he's still on Long Island, and he does gigs. He plays out sometimes. I think some of my dad's friends who are like artists in Seacliff run into him sometimes. And the assistant director was Fred Yeager. And when this is funny. When Joe Latini, before he left the library, the first way that he left Levels was because he was promoted. He was promoted to have a grown-up job in the library. And we teased him because even though he was already an adult, when he was working down at Levels, he dressed casually, as the Levels staff do, and we called him by his first name. And so, we treated him, a Levels staff member is an adult, but it's almost more like a camp counselor or something. It's a mentor of sorts, but it's somewhere in between, like a big scary grown-up and a peer. So we had treated Joe that way, like he was our mentor and our camp counselor. Then when we saw him start to wear a tie, we were like, oh, you're the man now. You grew up, you sold out, And I don't think we meant it, but it was cute. And Fred Yeager became the director of Levels. But I stayed involved with Levels for a long time, so I was still going there when Mario Blanco became the director of Levels, who's someone else who came up through the ranks being a Great Neck kid and then was just like part-time teaching guitar lessons at Levels and then became its director. And then I had already graduated and gone off to college, but I was still coming back and doing stuff here in the summer when Ethan Mann became the director of Levels, and then he still was until 10 years ago, until I was a grown-up already. So I've continued to follow the Levels staff throughout the whole time. Right, okay. So I was talking about that. Well, this I think is an interesting thing to think about because at a certain time, as I said, I kind of had an idea of what Great Neck is or what the culture of Great Neck is that wasn't wholly positive. And yet, here I am. I moved back. I came back. I live here. I'm raising my kids here. I really valued this town and I really value this community. And what changed? And in some ways, nothing changed but my priorities, because there are still, maybe elements of the culture in Great Neck that I don't relate to, but there's a thriving artistic community and there are amazing amenities at the schools and at the library. And I came to a point where I realized where else am I going to find things like this in a community? So anyway, that's sort of the point of my bringing up all that. A couple of other little things. In the summer of '94, when I was 16, I did an internship at the Great Neck Record. And Bill Dobkin was the editor. I had not been in touch with him in the intervening decades. And I even had to think for a minute to remember his name just because it had been so long.
Where was it located?
Right. So when you're on Great Neck Road, okay, so you know Bayview Avenue, we're on it, right? So if you go on Bayview Avenue long enough, it just kind of turns into Great Neck Road, or it doesn't turn into it, but you know, Great Neck Road intersects Bayview Avenue, and Bayview Avenue stops, and Great Neck Road keeps going the same way that Great Neck Road takes over. Do you know what I'm talking about? So then Great Neck Road goes around the bend and then passes where H Mart is now and eventually merges up with Northern. So while you're going around that bend, that short stretch of turning the corner around Great Neck Road, I don't know if it's even the same building now or a different building, but there was a building there with office space in there, and there was a couple of little rooms. It was, I mean, you know, the editor Bill had his own office, and then there was a second office, and then there was a sort of outer room that connected the two offices, but it was really just those three rooms. That was the whole headquarters of the operation. And I don't even really know or understand the status of Great Neck Record now, because in my day, there was the Great Neck Record, and then there was also Great Neck News, which was a second, smaller, if it could be smaller, right? They were both small. They were both community newspapers. Oh, right, but Great Neck Record belonged to Anton Publishing, which publishes community newspapers in various towns. Anyway, so they were both for a while, but now when you look at the paper, it says Great Neck Record News, and then on the website, you don't go to Great Neck Record or Great Neck News, you go to Long Island Press, right? Is that I don't understand. Anyway, so Great Neck Record was its own operation, and even though it was owned by a bigger company, it had its own local editor. And when I was thinking about Bill Dobkin, because I was thinking about this interview, I looked him up, and he passed away just a few years ago. I could have talked to him for years and years. I didn't. But he actually had an interesting story. He had a whole career as a social studies teacher, not in Great Neck, but he had a whole career as a teacher and retired, and then in his retirement became the editor of a community newspaper. Anyway, that was really cool, and I didn't bring those things, but I can sometime. I have articles that I wrote that when I was 16 years old, I got to publish articles under my own byline. The Great Neck Record had not posted an ad looking for interns, by the way. I made a cold call. I wanted to be involved with the community newspaper. I guess the reason it came into my head was because when we did Levels shows, one of the steps in the process was that when we were getting ready for the show, we would do whatever minor amounts of publicity we would do, which meant making a poster and putting them up in the schools and sending a press release to the Great Neck Record, and then it would appear there. So I had started to collect some clippings from the Great Neck Record because my shows were being publicized there. And then I got interested in them. I said, well, who makes that? I want to see that. I want to see their offices. So I called them, and I started to work there in the summer. All right, so just a couple other things. This is a nice story. This is a self-contained story. In 2002, when Sarah Hughes won in the Olympics, and she came back and received a hero's welcome.
What was she?
Oh, Sarah Hughes was an Olympic figure skater. She a Great Neck graduate, and she was just a teen at the time. She was a 16-year-old gold medalist figure skater from Great Neck. And we had a parade in town. There was a parade for Sarah Hughes. And we literally marched through town and then landed, I guess, right in front of where North High School is, right there on the north side of town, not far from here. We landed there, and then a couple of people spoke. Hillary Clinton, who was the senator from New York at that time, spoke, and Sarah Hughes herself spoke. And it was 2002. I had to look up that date. So I was 24, 25 years old. My sister was born in 93. She was 9. So my sister and I marched in this parade together and heard everybody speak. And of course, Senator Clinton is famous for a lot of things. But one of the things that she was known for at that time was that she wrote this book called It Takes a Village, which comes from an expression that it's not just a mom or a dad, it's the whole village that raises a child. And so Clinton had written this book, and Hillary Clinton came up there and declared that today is Sarah Hughes Day, and we all cheered and sort of laughed because, is this official? Can a senator make this be Sarah Hughes Day? But it was Sarah Hughes Day. And she introduced Sarah Hughes, and then Sarah Hughes spoke. And Sarah said, you know, it's been said that it takes a village to raise a child. For me, that village was Great Neck. And the crowd cheered so warmly, and my heart swelled with hometown pride. And I was looking at my little sister, and she was seeing this, and this was someone who is a potential role model for her. So it was a really good feeling. I think I've probably said all my best stuff, but there are just a couple of things that I want to wrap up, because there were 20 years where I did not live in Great Neck. I went off to college, and my permanent address was still my parents' address, but I graduated college in 1999, and I got an apartment in the city, and then in Brooklyn, and then in Queens, and I lived in various apartments with Wendy. We got married, and we did not move back to Great Neck until our daughter was going into 7th grade, and our son was going into 2nd grade in 2019, right? So there are 20 years in between that I didn't live here, but it always still felt like my permanent address. My parents were still here, and when we lived in Bayside and then Douglaston, this was kind of where we came. Like when I wanted to get a really good book from the library, I didn't tend to use the Queens libraries closer to where I was. I would come here because this was the nearest really great library when I wanted to take my kids to the park. This was where the really great parks were. And besides the fact that my kids had grandparents here in the community, so we ended up spending a lot of time, you know, taking the kids to Gino's Pizza on Middle Neck Road, or going to the Haagen-Dazs, or going to the Squire movie theater, right? May it rest in peace. We did a lot of Great Neck things, and I think my kids saw that the memories would pour out when we would come here. So it always, I think, felt sort of like home. And so then finally, when, the district where we lived in Bayside had good elementary schools. My kids went to a perfectly nice elementary school in Bayside. But when they started to get to middle school age, we didn't love our options. And so we started to look around for something more like what I had. And we were like, well, so do we move out of the city? Do we go to Westchester? Do we leave New York? Do we go back to Nassau? And it really it made sense to come here. It was still home. Now, my 2 kids are Levels kids. My 12th grader, B, is a graduating senior at Great Neck South. She just put on an original play that she wrote at Levels. It went up in December, the play Lobes. My son, Peter, who's 12, he's in 7th grade. He's starring in the Levels production of 12 Angry Men right now. So it's like a full circle kind of thing. And so I've talked and talked.
I have 2 questions
Yes,
for you.
yes.
So one, as you know, Great Neck is known for having a number of famous people that lived here.
Oh, yeah.
So do you have any memories of famous people you saw when you were growing up?
Yes. So my sister is the same age as Sarah Sherman, and they were friends. Sarah Sherman, who's now one of the stars of Saturday Night Live. When they were quite young, they were very good friends. And then you know how in high school you end up in different crowds. But yeah, my sister Evie was close with Sarah Sherman at one time. She came to the birthday parties. I remember seeing her around, and she always was a funny, odd kid. I don't think she would feel bad about being called odd. That is her brand of humor. But so yes, I remember Sarah Sherman well. Who else do I know that's well known? Well, I didn't. Oh. Well, no. I mean, there are a lot of people that that I'm connected to through some number of degrees of separation. Like, I didn't personally know Nikki Blonsky, who was a Levels kid and a Great Neck Theater kid, and who ended up doing professional theater. And she's best known for being in the musical Hairspray. I think that's what she's best known for. But she did a lot of things, and so I don't know her, but I knew people who knew her. We were part of the same theater scene to an extent. We overlapped a little bit. Something else just came into my head, but I forget.
And I also understand that you're on the nominating committee for the library.
Yeah.
So how did that come to be?
Yeah. Well, so a few years ago, some people that I knew started telling me, make sure that you vote for this person and not that one on the board of trustees. And I didn't know anybody that was on the board of trustees at that time, but I first began to, once I moved back to town in 2019, I started to hear things. And over the last 2-3 years, I started to be more invested in who's on the board of trustees. The nominating committee was not always on my radar, but the more I learned about it, the more I realized that the board of trustees is important, and if the board of trustees is important, then the folks who nominate the people to be on the board of trustees is very important too. So, so basically, I mean, it's not the politics of Great Neck Library candidates is not a very big world. It's pretty easy to get right to the center. You can get to know the trustees and get to know the people that are running for trustee. And so it got to the point where I was having informal meetings with people that were either running for re-election or that were thinking about running for election. And it came to the point where we would start to anticipate, there are going to be this many seats open on the board and this many seats open on the nominating committee. So I didn't get involved with this circle of people with the view that I myself would become a candidate, but there kind of came a situation where they were like, well, there are going to be 2 seats on the nominating committee. Who will run for those? Oh, this person's going to run for one of them, but we don't know who will run. And they started to say, well, would you consider running? And I thought about it and I said, well, sure, So yeah, I felt like I sort of got drafted to join it, but I think it's just the right amount of authority, because it's hardly a hoity-toity position to be on a nominating committee for a board of trustees. But we take our work seriously, and we sit in the room and we debate and try to come to a consensus and decide things about who will be on the board. And actually, if since we're being recorded, and if anyone's going to watch this, I definitely recommend that everyone in this community or in any community that you're a part of to join any local board that you can, for the school, for the library, for the park district, the water district. There are all these positions that you don't even know, or just for if you live in an apartment building or a homeowners association, for your neighborhood. It's just like somebody's on these boards making decisions. Why should it be someone else? Like, you should be involved. So anyway, yeah, I recommend that everyone get involved.
Thank you so much for joining us, and it's been a pleasure having you, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Very welcome.